So Passover's on his mind. There's no doubt about it. And I think we see that throughout the letter. But what's going on in 11? Okay, so remember that he's talked about in 10, he's specifically talked about you can't participate in the table of demons and the table of the Lord, right? And so I think in 10 specifically, I think there is a pretty strong argument. If you look at Greco-Roman culture, you look at the symposiums, you look at the Deipnons, right? I think that if you look at those in the ancient context and in the historical context, I think it's pretty clear that Paul is saying you can't go and participate in these symposiums and these Deipnons that are dedicated to other gods. Like, it's a form of worship. You can't do that. You can't do that and then come to the ecclesia, to the church, quote unquote church, and sit down and have your meal and participate unto God. This is what we call things that essentially differ, right? You cannot participate in things that essentially differ. And so to have a meal like this to the pagan gods, and then to have a meal like this to Yeshua or to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, however you want to look at it, this doesn't work. You can't do that, okay? So then we come into 11, and he talks about, it seems like he goes off context here, but he doesn't. He does not go out of context here. And the reason why is because the idea of haircuts, I think he's talking about hair. Now, I know this is controversial. I think he's talking about hair. My father has done a really good article on this, which can be found on TorahResource.com. It's called Should I Remove My Kippah? And he looks at 1 Corinthians 11. And this passage about, having your head covered and whatnot. I think what's going on in the beginning of this is the hairstyles, I think, would signal if a woman was a cult prostitute or not. And or if a man was a cult prostitute or not. And so when you have these, basically, keep in mind that at the symposiums, a lot of the after meal entertainment was cult prostitution, right? You're dedicating a meal and you're worshiping a god in this, in this meal. You get done with the meal. If cult prostitution is part, I'm sorry, like if there are kids listening, I apologize. If this is part of the worship of this god, and we know this kind of stuff happened all the time. In fact, it's talked about a lot in the literature, right? It's not nice stuff. Anyway, the point is that Paul, he doesn't shift out of the Deipnon. He doesn't move out of the symposiums and the Deipnon. He's still right there. He's talking about, cult prostitution, I think, and hairstyles that signal whether or not a person is a cult prostitute or not. Okay. And then he comes back into it. He comes back into his talk of the Deipnon. Now, once again, I haven't found anyone who has really talked a lot about this. Certainly people who are into meals in the Greco-Roman era are going to look at 1 Corinthians 11. People who know this literature well are going to see 10 and 11 and say, oh yeah, I know what's going on here. He's talking about Deipnons. But I still think that within Andrew McGowan, who's one of the leading scholars in meals in the Greco-Roman era, he sees that, he's done work to say, look, the elements of the Lord's Supper, the elements of communion, I have to watch my language here. The elements of the communion did not become the elements until the late third century. He has a whole book on this. So bread and wine did not become the official elements that were used in the Lord's Supper until the late third century. Let that one sink in for you for just a second. That means that the church was not celebrating with bread and wine all the time. Some people might have been, but they were using meals, like full-on meals. They were using cheese. They were using all sorts of stuff. Some used water instead of wine, right? I mean, there's all these different traditions, and it doesn't become solidified as bread and wine until the late third century. The other contribution that Andrew McGowan, who, by the way, By the way, the reason that this is important is because Andrew McGowan is actually an Anglican priest. And so, he's trying to do all this wonderful work on meals in the Greco-Roman era. At the same time, he is in, and I've asked him about this, but he's in a vein of Christianity that is very hyper focused on the elements of the communion and whatnot. He did a dynamite article, which you can download for free off the internet, on the term Lord's Supper. So the Lord's Supper is only used in 1 Corinthians 11. It did not get associated with communion or the Eucharist or whatever you want to say until the 4th century. Let that one sink in. Continue listening to this conversation by clicking the full show link on the left side of your screen, or check out the video on the right that YouTube thinks you'll like. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you never miss content from Messiah Matters.